In 1974, Muhammad Ali walked into a small diner in America that still lived by an old, ugly rule. A rule that didn't need to be written on the wall for everyone to understand it. A rule that had already decided who was welcome and who was not. The moment he stepped inside, the room changed. Conversations slowed, hands froze above plates, and every eye quietly turned toward the door. This was a place where people like Ali were never meant to sit down. A place where humiliation was expected, not resisted. Where most men would lower their heads, turn around and leave. Everyone thought they knew what would happen next. Some expected anger, some expected shouting, some expected security to step in, and some simply expected Ali to be embarrassed, like so many others before him. But what happened next shocked everyone, because Muhammad Ali didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't threaten anyone. Instead, he did something so calm, so unexpected, that it stopped the room cold. And with a few simple words, he didn't just challenge a rule. He changed the man who believed in it. The diner sat quietly on the corner of the street, its faded windows reflecting a town that hadn't fully moved on from its past. From the outside, it looked ordinary, almost harmless. People came and went every day without thinking about what it represented. But inside those walls lived a rule older than the building itself. A rule enforced not by law anymore, but by habit and fear. Everyone in town knew it, even if no one said it out loud. Some doors were never meant to open for everyone. When Muhammad Ali approached the entrance, the bell above the door was still, the street noise behind him hummed with normal life, unaware of what was about to happen. This wasn't a dramatic entrance. No cameras flashing, no crowd following, just one man, alone, walking with purpose. He had entered louder arenas, faced harsher opponents, and stood before far greater dangers. Yet this door carried a different weight. This door carried history. The moment his hand touched the handle, the space inside the diner felt it before anyone looked up. Something shifted, subtle but unmistakable. The kind of shift people feel in their chest before they understand it in their minds. Ali didn't rush. He didn't hesitate either. He opened the door the same way any man would. Calm, steady, unafraid. The bell rang as the door swung open, sharp and clear in the quiet room. That sound cut through clinking plates and low conversation. Forks paused mid-air. Coffee cups hovered just above tables. It wasn't loud panic, but slow realization. Heads turned one by one, as if pulled by instinct. The room saw him before it accepted what it was seeing. Ali stepped inside, tall and composed, his presence filling the doorway without effort. He didn't scan the room aggressively or lower his eyes. He stood straight, shoulders relaxed, breathing easy. There was no defiance in his posture, but there was no submission either. He carried himself like a man who knew exactly who he was, and that alone unsettled the balance. This diner had seen many people turned away before, quietly, quickly, without resistance. The system worked because most never tested it. The rule survived because it was rarely challenged. It lived in the silence of compliance. Ali's presence broke that silence without a single word. The air felt heavier now, thick with expectation. Some customers felt uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, suddenly aware of their own role as witnesses. Others stared openly, unsure whether they were watching history or a mistake. No one spoke yet. Silence was the language of the room, and silence has power. Ali took a few steps forward, his shoes echoing softly against the worn floor. Each step felt deliberate, even though he wasn't trying to make a statement. He wasn't performing courage. He was simply existing where he had been told he didn't belong. That alone was enough to challenge everything the room believed. Behind the counter, the owner noticed him fully now. His movements slowed, his attention locked on Ali. This was not how these moments usually unfolded. There was supposed to be hesitation, apology, retreat. Instead, there was calm certainty, walking toward the center of his diner. That calm felt dangerous to rules built on fear. The walls seemed to listen. Decades of unspoken agreement trembled under the weight of one man's presence. This place had always relied on familiarity, on everyone knowing their place. Ali didn't fit into that arrangement. He wasn't loud. He wasn't disruptive. He simply refused to shrink. Somewhere in the room, someone cleared their throat, as if trying to restore normalcy. Another looked down at their plate, suddenly uninterested in finishing their meal. The discomfort spread quietly, not as outrage but as unease. People sensed that something irreversible had begun. Once a door like this opens, it doesn't close the same way again. Ollie stopped near an empty table. Not sitting yet, not demanding anything. He waited. Not because he needed permission, but because he understood timing. He had learned long ago that patience could be more unsettling than force. The room leaned into that waiting, unsure how long it would last. The bell above the door stopped swinging, but the sound lingered in memory. That single chime marked a line between before and after. Before, the rule felt permanent. After, it felt fragile, all because one man chose not to accept what he had been told about his place. The diner had always been a place of routine. Same faces, same orders, same quiet assumptions. Allie disrupted none of that on the surface, and yet everything underneath began to crack. He didn't insult the space. He didn't reject it. He entered it as an equal. That was the threat. No one could accuse him of aggression. No one could point to bad behavior. He stood there with dignity, forcing the room to confront itself. Rules like these survive best when they go unquestioned. Allie's calm presence was a question without words. The owner's hands tightened around the towel he held, knuckles whitening slightly. He had relied on this rule for years, letting it do the uncomfortable work for him. Now the rule stood exposed, waiting to be enforced by a human face. That realization carried weight. Enforcement suddenly felt personal. Ali's eyes moved gently across the room. Not judging, not accusing, he saw fear, discomfort, curiosity, and shame. He didn't absorb it. He didn't reflect it back. He simply remained. That steadiness made the room restless. Stillness can be harder to face than anger. The diner felt smaller now, as if the walls had moved inward. Every second stretched. Every breath sounded louder. This wasn't confrontation yet, but it was no longer avoidance. The door had opened. The moment had begun, and everyone understood that whatever happened next would not be forgotten. This door had never been meant for him, according to the old rules. But Allie had walked through it anyway, not to provoke, not to dominate, but to exist fully, openly, and without apology. And in doing so, he placed a mirror in front of the room. By the time anyone spoke, the door behind him no longer mattered. The real threshold had already been crossed, the one inside the minds of everyone watching, and that was the moment the story truly began. The room did not react all at once. It reacted in pieces, in glances, and half movements, in the quiet language people use when they are unsure what they are witnessing. The diner had its usual sounds, cutlery, low murmurs, the hum of an old refrigerator, but something underneath those sounds had shifted. Normal life continued, yet it felt thinner, more fragile. Everyone sensed that the routine they trusted was being tested. Some customers looked up quickly and then away, as if eye contact might pull them into something they didn't want to face. Others stared longer than they meant to, curiosity wrestling with discomfort. No one smiled. No one greeted him. The silence was not neutral, it was loaded. It carried years of unspoken agreement, now suddenly unsure of itself. Muhammad Ali remained standing, patient and composed, letting the room finish reacting in its own time. He understood this pause. He had seen it before in different forms. It was the moment when people decide whether to follow habit or conscience. That decision often happens quietly, long before anyone speaks. The diner felt frozen in another era, not because of how it looked, but because of how it thought. Old rules lived here, not carved into wood or painted on glass, but passed down through behavior. People learned them by watching who was welcomed and who was not. The rule had survived because it rarely needed words. Ali's presence forced those invisible boundaries into view. What had once been automatic now felt deliberate. Each customer became aware of their own position, not just physically but morally. Sitting, watching, eating. Suddenly these ordinary actions felt like choices. Behind the counter, the owner watched closely, his expression tightening with recognition. This was no stranger. This was a man known across the world. Fame did not soften the tension, it sharpened it. Ali's identity stripped away any excuse of misunderstanding. Everyone knew exactly who had walked in. The owner's instincts kicked in, shaped by years of doing things the same way. His body moved before his thoughts fully caught up. He wiped his hands slowly, buying time. He had relied on routine to keep moments like this simple, but nothing about this felt simple anymore. The customers waited for him to act. Some expected quick enforcement, the familiar ending they had seen before. Others dreaded it, hoping someone else would take responsibility. The room leaned toward the counter, attention drawn there without a word being spoken. Ali did not approach the counter yet. He stayed where he was, giving the room space to reveal itself. He understood that rushing forward would feel like confrontation. Waiting allowed everyone else to feel the weight of the moment. Patience, he knew, can be unsettling. The air grew thick with anticipation. Time seemed to stretch, seconds feeling longer than they were. The diner's clock ticked loudly, each second marking the absence of action. No one reached for a menu. No one asked for coffee refills. The pause demanded attention. Somewhere near the back, a man shifted uncomfortably in his seat. A woman stared down at her plate, suddenly unable to finish her meal. This wasn't about Ali alone anymore. It was about what kind of place this diner truly was, and whether anyone inside was willing to acknowledge it. Ali's calm made the situation harder to dismiss. There was no aggression to justify resistance, no disrespect to point to. He wasn't demanding service or making a speech. He was simply standing there existing fully, refusing to preemptively remove himself. The owner felt the pressure build, not from Ali but from the room itself. Expectations pressed in from all sides. The rule had always protected him from reflection. Now it demanded enforcement, and enforcement demanded ownership. That realization sat heavy. For years, this diner had functioned on predictability. People knew where they stood, literally and figuratively. Ali disrupted that without lifting a finger. His presence asked a question. The room wasn't used to answering. Why is this rule here at all? The silence began to feel accusatory. Not toward Ali, but toward everyone else. It asked who would speak first, and why. It exposed how much effort went into maintaining separation. Doing nothing was suddenly an action with meaning. Ali's posture remained relaxed, but his awareness was sharp. He watched reactions form and dissolve across faces. Fear, uncertainty, shame, curiosity. He had learned long ago not to absorb these emotions, only to notice them. They belonged to the room, not to him. The owner cleared his throat, a small sound that cut through the quiet. It was the first sign that the moment would move forward. His voice had not yet formed words, but his body had already chosen a path. The pause was ending. No one knew exactly what would be said, but everyone understood its weight. Whatever came next would not just apply to this moment, it would define how this diner remembered itself. The room leaned in, holding its breath again. Ali remained where he was, steady and unflinching. He had not come to force change. He had come to reveal truth, and truth, once revealed, demands a response. The room was about to give one. This was the frozen room, suspended between past and future, a place caught between habit and humanity. Ali had not raised his voice or his fists, yet the quiet he introduced was louder than any confrontation, and the next words spoken would decide everything. The owner stood behind the counter longer than usual, pretending to adjust things that didn't need adjusting. His hands moved on instinct, not purpose. He had seen moments like this before, but never like this. Usually the problem solved itself. People understood the rule. They left quietly. Today the problem was still standing in front of him, calm and unmovable. He studied Muhammad Ali from a distance, trying to place him into a category that made sense. Trouble, protest, disruption. None of those fit. Ali wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't even demanding attention. He stood there with the ease of someone who had nothing to hide and nothing to prove. That made the situation harder, not easier. The owner had grown up with this diner, inherited not just the business but the way it was run. Rules like this were never discussed in depth. They were passed down like furniture, unquestioned and heavy. You didn't analyze them. You maintained them. They were part of how things worked, and how things worked had always seemed safer than change. For a brief moment, the owner hoped Ali would turn around on his own. That hope came not from cruelty, but from fear of disruption. If Ali left, nothing would have to be decided. The room could return to normal. The rule would remain invisible, untested, intact. Comfort would be restored. But Ali didn't set move. The owner felt irritation rise, not because of who Ali was, but because the moment demanded action. Being forced to act is uncomfortable. When you've relied on systems to act for you, he had always let the rules speak, so he didn't have to. Now the rule needed a voice, and that voice would be his. He took a step forward, then stopped. His eyes moved around the diner, catching the faces of his regular customers. Some looked to him expectantly, others avoided his gaze. He realized suddenly that he wasn't just representing himself, he was representing the room, the past, the way things had always been done. That realization made his chest tighten. Ali's presence carried a strange contradiction. On one hand, he was a world-famous figure, known everywhere. On the other, he stood there like an ordinary man asking for nothing more than a place to exist. Fame didn't protect him here. If anything, it made the moment sharper. Everyone would remember what happened next. The owner straightened his back, trying to regain authority. This was his place, his diner, his responsibility. That thought gave him temporary confidence. Rules exist for a reason, he told himself. Order requires enforcement. If he hesitated too long, he would lose control of the room. He cleared his throat, the sound louder than he expected in the quiet space. A few heads turned. Plates stopped clinking. This was it. The moment where habit would become action. The moment where an invisible line would be drawn visibly, in front of everyone. The owner looked directly at Ali now, meeting his eyes for the first time. What he saw unsettled him. There was no challenge there, no anger, just patience. That patience felt heavier than defiance would have. It offered no excuse to react harshly. Still, he spoke. His voice came out firm, controlled, practiced. He used the same tone he had used many times before, the tone that kept things simple. He stated the rule as if it were a fact of nature, not a choice, as if it existed independently of him. The words landed in the room and stayed there. For a second, the owner felt relief. The rule had been spoken. The responsibility had been passed back to the system. This was how it was supposed to go. Ali would understand. Ali would leave. The room would exhale. But Ali didn't react the way he expected. The owner waited for anger, for protest, for argument. None came. The lack of reaction made his words feel exposed, almost fragile. Without resistance, they sounded less like authority and more like habit, less like law and more like preference. A flicker of doubt crossed his mind, quick and unwelcome. He pushed it away. This was not the time for doubt. Doubt complicates things. Doubt opens doors better left closed. He had done what was expected of him. That should be enough. The customers watched closely now, sensing that something had gone off script. The usual rhythm was broken. The owner felt their attention like weight on his shoulders. He had spoken, but the moment wasn't finished. It lingered, unresolved. Ali still stood there, calm as before. The owner felt a subtle shift inside himself, something he couldn't yet name. His certainty didn't feel as solid as it had moments earlier. He had enforced the rule, but instead of restoring order, it had created tension. That was new. For the first time, he wondered what would happen if Ali didn't leave. That question made his stomach tighten. The rule had always worked because it was rarely challenged. Now it stood face to face with a man who wasn't afraid of consequences. The owner realized, perhaps too late, that enforcing the rule meant owning it fully. The confidence he had started with began to thin, not disappear, but weaken. He stood there, waiting for a reaction that didn't come, surrounded by a silence that felt different now, less supportive, more questioning. This was the owner's first reaction, and it wasn't anger or cruelty. It was certainty colliding with calm. And in that collision, something inside him had already begun to shift, even if he wasn't ready to admit it yet. The words hung in the air longer than the owner expected. They didn't crash or explode. They simply sat there, heavy and uncomfortable, demanding acknowledgement. This was the sentence that usually ended the moment, the sentence that closed the door without further discussion. It had worked countless times before, but today it felt different, weaker, somehow. Muhammad Ali did not flinch. He didn't stiffen his shoulders or tighten his jaw. He didn't show surprise or hurt on his face. Instead, he absorbed the words as if he had heard them before, as if they were familiar. That calm unsettled the room more than anger ever could. The insult had been delivered, but it hadn't landed the way it was meant to. A quiet ripple moved through the diner. Someone shifted their chair. Someone else coughed nervously. A few people glanced toward the door, half expecting Ali to turn and leave. That was how these moments were supposed to end. Quiet compliance. No scene. No reflection. Just a return to normal. Ali stayed where he was. The owner felt a flash of irritation, not violent, but sharp, not because Ali had done anything wrong, but because he hadn't done what was expected. The script was being ignored. The rule had been spoken, yet the outcome had not followed. That gap between expectation and reality created discomfort. This was the moment humiliation was supposed to do its work. The rule was designed to shrink a man, to make him feel out of place, to remind him of his supposed position. Many men before Ali had felt it immediately. Shoulders would slump, eyes would lower, feet would turn back toward the door. Alistid's posture didn't change. He stood tall, not defiantly, but naturally, as if the words hadn't stripped anything from him. That quiet dignity robbed the insult of its power. Without visible shame, the sentence felt exposed, almost crude. It demanded a reaction that never came. The customers began to feel it too. What had once been routine now felt uncomfortable to witness. Some had seen scenes like this before, but never like this. Never with a man who refused to absorb the weight he was being handed. The humiliation had nowhere to go. The owner felt eyes on him again. Not the expectant eyes from before, but questioning ones. The room seemed to ask whether the rule was enough, whether the sentence he had spoken truly settled anything. He had enforced it, yet nothing felt resolved. Ali's silence stretched the moment, forcing everyone to sit with it. There was no argument to latch onto, no raised voice to justify escalation, just a calm presence standing in the space it was told not to occupy. That made the rule feel smaller. A few people began to feel uneasy for a different reason. Now, not fear of confrontation, but discomfort with the rule itself. Watching a man be calmly denied something ordinary, like a seat or a meal, suddenly felt harder to justify. The simplicity of the injustice made it clearer. The owner noticed this shift, even if he didn't fully understand it yet. The room was no longer unified behind him. Silence had changed sides. It no longer supported the rule. It questioned it. That realization stirred something unpleasant in his chest. Ali's eyes met the owner's again, steady and open. There was no accusation there, no challenge, just presence. It was as if Ali were saying without words that he would not leave unless forced, and he would not hate unless given reason. The humiliation that was meant to push Ali out instead turned inward. The owner felt exposed, standing there as the visible face of a rule that suddenly felt old and brittle. He had expected authority to feel solid. Instead, it felt heavy. The diner no longer felt like a place of routine. It felt like a stage. Every movement mattered now. Every word carried weight. The rule had been spoken, but it had not ended the moment. It had only begun it. Ali remained calm, and that calm demanded a response. Not from him, but from the room. Someone would have to decide what happened next. The insult alone was no longer enough. This was the moment of expected humiliation. And yet humiliation refused to arrive. What stood in its place was something far more unsettling, a quiet challenge to a belief that had never been tested like this before. And as the silence deepened, everyone sensed it. The rule had done its part. Now the man behind it would have to do his. Muhammad Ali didn't change that diner with anger. He didn't raise his voice. He did instead demand respect. He changed it by refusing to become smaller. No punches were thrown. No insults were returned. No hatred was answered with hatred. Just dignity standing calmly where it was never meant to stand. And sometimes that quiet refusal is powerful enough to break a rule that survived for decades.